it's hard to be someone who can pour into others or pour into your job or pour into your work if your cup isn't already full.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 Podcast.
What's up, Mountain Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 Podcast. Today's guest, Herb Sargent, came highly recommended from a guest earlier this year, Scott Kimplin. As soon as we finished the recording, he said one name, one person. We had to get Herb Sargent on. And so in the prep for this, got to go through a little bit of Herb's history and see what they stand for as a company and look through his career and talk a little bit offline. And we know we're in for a treat. Herb, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I can tell Scott doesn't know me as well as he thought he did if he's recommending me.
Well, we're about to find out, right? We're about to find out. Okay.
Proof will be in the pudding, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's right. Okay, so before we started recording, you gave us a super nugget, which was that on last week's episode, we gave David credit for being the guest that was from the smallest hometown ever. That record lasted 1 week. True or false?
1 week. True.
All right, tell me about that. I guess actually let's come to that second. Herb, give me an elevator pitch. Who's Herb Sargent?
Okay, Herb Sargent. So I've been in the construction business. Started when I was literally like 14 years old, working around the shop. I lived very close to my grandfather's business, and spent really every waking hour when I got done school, instead of walking home, I walked down to the shop, and just the smell of heavy equipment and the diesel and all the oils and all that stuff that was in the shop really attracted me, and the people really attracted me. So started working for the company in a real way when I was 16. So that was 45 years ago, and I've been at it pretty much ever since.
So does that smell, is it still like the smell of all of it still get you going? Like, do you still love it like you did then?
Oh yeah. I walk in the shop and I'm like, this is me.
Yeah.
I don't spend any time there anymore to speak of, but I walk in there and I go, this is my roots right here. The concrete floor that's been all scratched up by bulldozer grousers and all that's, just really, and the people really, there's such an attraction for me. The talent that they put into it and the care they put into the work they do. That's one of the things that really got me going early.
Yeah, I get that for sure. Something you said made me think about like the smell of it, where there's these smells that just take you back to a place that it just feels like home, man. I get that for sure.
Yeah, I get a similar one when I go on a new job site we've just cut the trees.
Yes.
The smell of that is just, that gets me.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, let's go.
That's awesome. Well, so take me back to the David's record only lasted for 1 week. You're from a smaller town than David. Yeah,
it's actually part of another town, but it's. I actually looked it up because I want to make sure I was right. We have a population of 197 people in this little village called Stillwater, Maine, that we've been in since the 1930s, and the population swells by about 40% when we all go to work in the morning.
So is that home, or is that where you presently live?
It's going to be home for me. I haven't lived there myself since I was about 8 years old, but I'm moving back actually into my grandfather's old house later this year.
Oh, that's an exciting story.
Yeah.
Talk about memories, right? I don't know your grandfather, obviously, but the idea of kind of going back to your roots, that's a story in and of itself.
Yeah. It'll be, I'll be within about 400 feet of where I grew up. So.
Yeah. So take me through however long the story is. It's probably short or long, depending on which version we get. But how'd you, coming from small town, end up in construction? Your grandfather's part of those stories. Tell us your construction get up, man.
Yeah, so he started in 1926. He was born at a time in 1906, there was no electricity, there were no cars, there were no TVs, no refrigerators, no anything, right? And he got started in a really kind of amateurish way by delivering sawdust. His dad had a sawmill, and he delivered sawdust around for ice boxes in what I'll loosely call the neighborhood. I think the closest neighbor was about a mile away, but he'd sell it for 25 cents a wagon load, horse-drawn wagon load. And so that just kind of got him into this moving material world. And he bought a dump truck in 1926 and started his business that way. And as, the highway and airport scene grew, I mean, remember when he was born, it was only 3 years after the Wright brothers flew. So there were no airports around. So he got swept into a really big building environment over the next many decades, including I-95 through Maine and that sort of stuff. So he really did well in that regard. And my dad started working for him in the late 50s, and my uncle, and they took over the company in the mid 70s. Sold the company to a company from Paris, France in the late 80s. I stayed for a few years, then left, started my own business with my brother, and then about 12 years later came back and bought the original family business, which was at that time about 6 times bigger than us. So it was a pretty big lift from a debt perspective.
It's so crazy.
Not from a lot of different perspectives, but from a debt perspective.
Yes.
You have these like already full circle loops, both with the legacy of Sargent, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, it's really been quite a career for me. I look at some of the early folks that I had an opportunity to be mentored by. My grandfather being one of the primary ones. He actually lived to be 100, and he was 99 years old when we bought his company back. So, and very, very lucid and keen. So that was a really cool time for me to, sit on his front porch swing and talk about it, and let him know that it actually did happen. So that really cool thing. And then, to take that company, and for me, I had to figure out how to make it continue to go. And I mentioned you guys briefly, we'll be 100 years old in 2 years, but I told our guys to start planning for the 200th anniversary, because that's the way I've tried to set this up. So we're employee owned now. So really the ownership never has to change. We're part of an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, and the ownership never really has to change. It just continues to cascade across owners across the decades. And now it's really just a management succession project until someday we don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Which I hope is never.
Well, that's the plan, right? At least for another 100. You're planning for this already.
Yeah.
Take me. We've touched on it just a little bit, and I think eventually, one of the themes of the podcast is the widget doesn't matter, right? Whatever the widget is, there's a lot more to what you're doing to build the company around the widget. But focus with me on the widget for a little bit, because we got a few flavors, but I want to give the full, what does Sargent do? What's your core competencies? Yeah.
So historically, a highway builder, airport, really anything that requires earth moving. And then in the late 70s, early to late 70s, the big highway push I wouldn't say ended, but it certainly wasn't what it was, right? All the interstates were built by then. And so the company had to make a number of different pivots over the years, from more highway grading work into more environmental type work. So sewer, water, wet utilities, that sort of stuff. Later on, landfill construction became a big piece of what we do. So we build new cells and cap old cells in landfills. And then the commercial work came, all the Walmarts and all this business that got built in the late 90s and 2000s, at least for us here in Maine, it was late 90s, mid to late 90s and 2000s. And a lot of what we call institutional site work, so schools, hospitals, that sort of stuff. And more recently, we've gotten into a lot of renewable energy work, so wind power projects, solar projects, and those make up a pretty big piece of what we do now.
I was on y'all's website earlier. There's like I'm always, well, let me say this differently. Those renewable projects, the size and scope of them always sort of like baffles my mind. And there's a beautiful shot on y'all's website of across a solar project with the turbines turning, but it's across like a beautiful wooded landscape. And there's something like weirdly serene about all of it. I always am fascinated by those jobs.
Yeah, for me, those wind power projects are, they're like these big sentinels on top of a mountain. They're, at least in Maine, they tend to be mountain based versus, a lot of places they're scattered across thousands of acres of flat field. But for us, and that's really where we derive most of our work for those, is we don't do the actual turbine setup. We just construct the infrastructure, the highway work, the road work to get into these, and it's pretty significant. You have to level off a spot for each turbine that's about an acre.
Yeah,
and that doesn't sound like a hell of a lot of space, but when you're on a slope that might be 40 feet higher on one side of that acre than it is on the other, there's a significant amount of work.
Yeah,
to go into that.
Kev, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Last night I had an FMI presentation, and they were talking about the future of construction, old economy versus new economy. And I'm a glass guy, and looking at the new economy, I'm like, oof, not much glass up there on the board for those bullet points of new economy. Your scope transcends old or new because it needs to begin with some site work, whether it's a highway, whether it's a turbine, an office building. It needs you.
Yep. Provided the development, always continues, then, it's always going to be there. And there's a big push in construction to go with modular construction for buildings and that sort of thing. But, we're not going to be able to farm out the site work, right? You can't do the site work somewhere else and truck it in or bring it on a barge. So I think we're somewhat protected there, but the economy still has to be good, and people still have to have really good ideas of ways and reasons to build things. And not just, nobody's going to hire us to build something just because they think it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it turns out although it is fun to watch, what you guys do, y'all's scope is so fun to watch.
I agree.
Yeah, I won't bore anybody with the stories, but I've been on the jobs where the iron is moving, and you're just like, this is enormous. Like the scope and size and movement is just enormous. All right, take me to. I don't want to yada over stuff, but what I really want to focus on is your company and the culture and what y'all are building and how you're building it and stuff like that. And I don't know exactly where we start. We could start anywhere, but maybe just tell me like what's it like to work at Sargent and the culture and what y'all are building there.
Well, of course, I have somewhat of a biased approach here, and I may not be the best one to ask. If I finger through a few of our surveys, I could probably tell you some real stuff. But really, the way we look at our business is we're in business really to build people first, and then those people go build projects. So, we have this, I don't want to call it a campaign, but a program, Build a Life with Us. And that includes, building your career, building yourself, and building your wealth. And the wealth piece of it is, I look at that as our 401k plan and our ESOP plan, which in last year, typically an ESOP, a 401k plan, an employer will match up to about 3% of somebody's pay. And we still do that, but we also have the employee stock ownership plan. And in 2023, that created a benefit for our employees of about 18%.
Oh, wow.
So whatever their W-2 wages are, about 18% of that is built into, their future retirement plan. So a really big benefit, and it's been a few good years. What it's like to work here, I can only imagine that in some ways, but
yeah.
What we want for people to do is come here and grow. And I said, career, self, wealth. And the self piece is the piece that we've really been focusing on. And as a business, we know we need margins of safety. We need to, in order to be as resilient as a business as we can be. And so we want that to go down and to be like projected down to our employees. And we want them to be as resilient as they can be. We want them to have margins of safety in all areas of their life. And I kind of quickly check it off as financial, relational, physical, and financial, relational, physical, and
Sure.
career.
Yeah.
And we want them to have a good career. And like, I'm not going to hold seminars on how to be a better dad or mom or husband or wife or anything like that. But if we can just provide some of the resources that people need, or some of the ideas that people need, the mindset that people need to just kind of be better about being relational. If we can give them the resources, we use Ramsey Solutions, which is if you know Dave Ramsey. So that's available to our folks so they can learn how to budget. And the whole idea is if you have a financial problem, it stays a problem and doesn't become a crisis.
Right.
So that's creating that margin of safety around that. And then, the physical, we have a wellness plan and we have a health savings accounts that we match money going into so that people can hopefully get well, stay well, and stay reasonably fit, so that they can just. What I've seen when people have health events like a heart attack or something, it's really heavy on the whole family, right? So we're trying to point people in the wellness direction so that their families don't have to experience that sort of stuff. And in the career piece, is providing growth opportunities and investment in the people to make sure that they have, ways that they can improve themselves and grow in their positions or grow into a new position. Some positions, our CFO always says, look, I've got nowhere to migrate to, but I can grow in my position. So it's really a growth mindset around those four things.
Okay, I have a lot of questions. I have this working theory. I have a lot of working theories that I haven't actually taken to any sort of meaningful fruition. But one of them, and I was having this conversation with a buddy of mine, Philip, and the idea that I was postulating was that people who didn't have, and what I was saying was security, but what you're saying is like safety margin around those ideas. They make decisions differently than people who do have safety or margin or security around those four pillars.
Mm-hmm.
And that transcends the office. We were having the conversation around the office about like, if someone has a financial insecurity or financial instability or doesn't have safety, whatever you say it, then the question I had posited is, are those people more likely to do X or not? And we're sort of triaging through that. And so I came to my eventual postulate was that the why you would do those things that you said was you would do them for the purposes of ensuring corporate stability, because I need these people who make decisions for my company to make good decisions for my company, and they can't do that if they don't have safety factors around those things.
Yeah,
that's my own theory, though. And so I would ask back to you the why, like what eventually led you to that theory, and why did you go? Why are you there on it?
Because I've seen enough people struggle. I've seen enough suicides. I've seen enough people struggle with coming in and saying, I need to borrow $1,000 because I lost my transmission. And I also know, and it's probably a rare individual that doesn't, nothing can kind of create animosity in a relationship, in a marriage, than financial hardship, right? It's just one of those things. And I just feel like being financially astute and being financially sound, or at least being educated around the decisions you make, I think really takes a lot of pressure off the things you need to do to be in a good mutual relationship. So that financial piece to me is so important.
Yeah,
And
that's I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
well, and you know, I guess it's hard to be, it's hard to be someone who can pour into others or pour into your job or pour into your work if your cup isn't already full.
Yeah. You gave the correct altruistic answer. My thesis was based on like corporate success, but that's the better answer to why, is because it's the right thing to do for people,
Yeah.
and you're making families better, and you're making communities better, and you're making all. And the net outcome of that is your organization's better, but that's a byproduct to making your people and your families and your jobs and your community
Right.
better.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the better answer. My answer is terrible. I retract everything I said. Yours is I take your answer as the correct one at this point.
Well, you know, it's not always correct, but it is to me, it is after having seen so many people over the course of my career. And I've seen people literally that have worked for this company for 50 years and they retire and they got nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we need to do something different. We need people that come, and the way I say it, people that come and work in this business, whether it's for our company or somebody else, to me, they ought to have like a bumper crop of security and dignity when they retire.
I do youth ministry and get access to 6th through 12th graders every Wednesday. And I ask them all the time, every week, what do you want to do when you grow up? All the time, surveying. Not a one has said someday I want to get in construction. You know, it's at best a broker, a real estate broker, something like that. A lot of us fall backwards into it because of career limiting decisions, not giving it your all in an early age, whatever the case may be. And so you find a bunch of people that might be a little bit lost that are under our care. And so what do you do? I would assume with a game plan of build a life with us, that is going to shock that person's system because they're not being used to being cared for at that level.
That is true. And frankly, you know, there's some suspicion around it. You know, and we recruit from the high schools pretty heavily. And when we bring them in, they're employees day one. We have about 2 weeks of classes, then 2 weeks of field work, and then they go to work. And then we bring them in the next winter for a couple weeks to kind of learn figure out what they've learned and what they need to be added to their line card, so to speak. And this past year was the first time we kind of had them in with the superintendent meetings, and we invited their parents in for kind of a graduation. And so all our folks, every single person last year, we have a profit sharing bonus where we bonus away 10% of our profit, and every person gets the same amount. It's not, there's no scale. It's every laborer, every truck driver, every dozer operator, foreman, superintendent gets the same amount. And last year, every single one of them got $4,800 for a bonus. And so one of the parents came into me and he was like, when he told me that about this profit sharing bonus thing, he was asking me what it was, before they got it. And he said, well, that's probably just a sales pitch thing.
Yeah. And
when you guys actually gave him a $4,800 check and he's 18 years old, so bringing the parents along is an important aspect of it too. But there is a lot of suspicion around companies saying we're here for you.
Yeah. I think we started with the adage, the proof is in the pudding, right? Like you can say whatever you want. You can't do whatever you want. You have to do what you say you're going to do. Otherwise, it's just garbage. That's interesting. I had written down, why is there so much, when you were talking, I wrote down, why is there so much suspicion and how do you dispel that? I think you just answered that though, right? Suspicion is natural and you dispel it by your actions, right?
Well, I think it's natural because so many people work for employers that don't have, an altruistic bent to them. They work for employees that are there to scrape profit off everybody's back. Now I'm being a little rough, hard, but it is true. And so, an example is one of these kids. This is 10 years ago, so the wages are wildly different now. But almost 10 years ago, we started these guys off. We said, you come to work at $13 an hour, and in 6 weeks, when you quote unquote graduate from this program, we'll raise you to $14 an hour. How does that sound to you? And the kid was like, well, my dad's been running a feller buncher for a tree harvesting operation for 20 years, and he's making $14 an hour now.
Man.
Running a big piece of heavy equipment,
Yeah.
making $14 an hour. And he goes, I'm going to make it after 6 weeks. And it was almost like they didn't believe it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the generational distrust that we've built. And so like that $4,800 check, that's a big swing. That's one of those where you might be one and done on convincing them that you walk the talk. But I've noticed that it's not just one time of your actions matching your words, because it could be an affirmation. It could be a employee of the month, whatever the case, a training for your personal life. And there's a kind of a vibe of what's the catch? Like, what do you want out of me? And it's like, nothing. I love you. That's all.
That's exactly it. Right. And we just had employee meetings. We haven't had them since before COVID. So we always had employee meetings every single year. We call them startup meetings. They're in March and April. As we're getting ready to fire up our projects, our work season is seasonal. We don't work much in the wintertime. And for the first time, we had these guys in, and I guess maybe I'm getting soft in my old age, but I said, look, I don't know you all, and I can't really know you all, but you need to know I have love in my heart for you, and I want the best things for you. I want you to be healthy. I want you to have a great relationship with your family. I want you to come to work and feel joy around what you do here at work and the people you work with. And I want you to be able to build yourself a life that you can be proud of, that other people in the industry, like our competitors, aren't doing these things. And I want them to be like, I work for Sargent. That's why I can do these things, because they care.
There's the fire right there.
Yeah. I was just like, there's a mic drop right there. Because I can see that moment where you're saying it to a bunch of people who you don't really know them, right? But you don't know them. And it's not possible to, when you grow to a certain size, it's not possible to. But it is still possible to have like genuine care for those people who have trusted you with most of their awake hours. It's legitimate to have care for those people and want the best for them and hope that they go home healthy and happy and satisfied and come to work with joy. That's a legitimate thing.
And to me, I guess, there's no better way to derive joy than through love, right? I mean, it's just Christian to begin with, and to have love in my heart for these guys, girls, I really do. It's a real thing, and it brings so much more purpose to what I do and what we do as a company. And I'm so fortunate to have the people here that I work with that believe that way, right? I mean, in fact, in some ways, they push me to believe that way better. And I'm so fortunate to have that for a team here.
One of the things we do on the podcast is ask people to tell us like what they screwed up along the way. And I went and looked before we started. We were talking about that. You said I just not an hour ago posted about this. So while you were talking, I was probably terribly multitasking. And when
I noticed you weren't paying attention.
I went and found the LinkedIn and it was kind of reading it on the side. I'm not even going to try to summarize it. Like I want to tee that up for you because that is dovetails to what you were just talking about. In a way that I think is important for a lot of people, and perhaps maybe what we see on the horizon. So, lay it on me. Biggest. Okay,
well, mistake. Yeah. So my big mistake.
Yeah.
And some of it was circumstantial. So I got to give myself a little bit of grace on that. But I told you guys we bought my grandfather's company. I had to borrow a lot of money to do that. 3 years later, the Great Recession hit. So we became financially brittle, I would say, is maybe the best way to put it. There wasn't a lot of elasticity to our ability to take thumps in the side of the head. So, as a result, going through the Great Recession, we didn't we had to offload everything that wasn't going to get us our next mile. So one of the things we offloaded was the way we invested in people historically. And it was just like, well, we got to do this. And that was the biggest mistake I've ever made, because all of a sudden in, let's say, 16, 17, 18, the economy roared back in a way that I've never seen it take place, the construction economy, in my career. And we were struggling for people. The whole industry was struggling for people. The whole industry still is struggling for people. And as a result, we didn't have the people to take advantage of some of the opportunity. Now, we became employee owned in 2013, like right at the end of the recession. And I cost my employees money by not being prepared. And so the two things that I wrote about there were: be resilient, get resilient, and stay resilient. Figure out what resilience means. Because, I mean, you can go to Webster's and get the dictionary definition of what resilience means, but it's really contextual, depending on geography, but depending on what you do for work, depending on how many employees you have. There's so many different contextual impacts that you need to be aware of. So figure out what resilience means to your company and to you personally, because again, if you're a company owner that's struggling financially, you're not going to be able to run the business the way it ought to be run and invest in people through those hollow times. And Warren Buffett has a quote that, when stocks are down, like during the Great Recession, I think this is when this quote became famous. When the sky is raining gold, you need to have a bucket out. And so I say, when the sky is raining talent gold, we need to have a big bucket out.
Yeah.
And I think as an industry, we need to do that. And that would, I think the industry has shown the worst parts of itself over the last few years. I've had people go up to my superintendents or my estimators at a pre-bid conference and say, why don't you come to work for us? Tell me what Herb's paying you and we'll pay you $10,000 more. It's just the worst. It's the sleaziest, and we won't participate in that. So, I think as an industry, if we can invest in people, we make them better, we make the industry better, and we make ourselves resilient at the same time. I just don't think there's a better winning combination.
So replay that mistake. We say we won't go backwards because it teaches us valuable lessons, but we get ready for the next one. So let's say that whole cycle was to happen again. You borrowed the money, recession hits again. What's your tactic to open that bucket up? Is to borrow more, lend, just knowing that it's going to bounce?
That's a really good question, because I mean, it's pretty hard to borrow your way into resilience. So I would have to say, if we went back again, number one, I don't feel like investing in people has to be super expensive. Now, we're doing it in a way that costs money. It really requires intention more than it does expense. So if we could just be more intentional about pouring into people, just mentoring, get a mindset, a posture of mentoring, a posture of always pouring into each other. That's a big difference that I don't think I saw very well back then. Also, I think I would recruit more than we did, because we could use the people, but we just turned that faucet off. So I would recruit a little bit more, bring people in. In 2012, 10% of our people were under 25 years old. That's an old company. 56% of our people were over 40. That's an old company. Fast forward 10 years, 25% of our people are under 25 now, and 56% of our people are under 40. Oh, wow. So we've really changed the demographics significantly, and I just feel like, to me, I don't have to go back and relive that, but maybe somebody else does. Maybe somebody else just borrowed a lot of money and bought a company. Get resilient as fast as you can. Figure it out. Maybe you can work with your bank to stretch payments out so you don't have to, you don't have to bunch it all into 5 or 10 years. But figure out what resilience looks like. Now I know, right? We're going to have lean times again. It's going to happen. And 5 years ago, we said to ourselves, this is going to happen this year. And it didn't. COVID hit instead. But we're going to have lean times. And the time to get ready, I talked about the heart attack. The time to get ready for the heart attack is now.
Right.
And then hopefully you never have it.
Yeah.
Love and honesty are pretty inexpensive. Like to your earlier point of the love piece, like I was just talking about the lunch appointment today before this recording about sometimes how we swing and miss on like extravagant things, like let's go on this big adventure or like a retreat together or this big ball game and everybody gets to go, and you find out afterwards, like maybe a month afterwards, that people didn't want to go. They were reluctant. They only did it because they feel like they were forced because you set it up. Yeah. And you're like, wait a minute, this was for y'all. When at the end of the day, maybe it's just a hand on the shoulder explaining the roadmap forward that you see through this recession and that you're trying and that although there isn't a bonus this year, like we got our eye on trying to protect you as much as possible. And that's just like some person on person love. Like it's just loving on someone.
There's one thing that I'm really proud of about our organization is we're brutally honest. So when we say you're going to get a profit sharing bonus, we're taking literally 10% of the profit. We're dividing it evenly by the number of employees. If somebody's only worked part of the season, it gets prorated, but somebody that's been here for the full season gets the same amount, whether they're a 1-year employee or a 20-year employee. Then when we have our startup meetings, we literally put the financial statement on the wall. Here it is. Here's where the number came from. So we never have to run away when and hide when this bonus is not $4,800. I mean, that's kind of an obscene bonus for every laborer operator. I mean, we never have done that, but we just had that good a year. And so when it's half of that or a quarter of that, or not that long ago, I think the bonus was $300, but it's like, we told you how we're going to do it, and this is what it is. And just that transparency, I think, builds so much trust.
Yeah, I do know why. I was going to ask a rhetorical question that I don't know why people are so afraid of transparency, but I do know why. It's because they have something to hide, right? They're doing something that they don't want found out. But to your point, the transparency builds so much trust. Like, this is what we did this year, and this is how, and that did exactly what I said I was going to do. And it's not the number I wished it was, because I wish we had done better, but we didn't, and this is it.
Right. Like, I mean, we're all in this together. That is an employee ownership thing. We're all in this together, and when the market goes down, we're gonna have to tighten up. But it's also, for me, it helps us push the notion that we always have to hone our craft. Right? We can't get complacent, and we always have to hone our craft, and we have to be, if there's a better way to do something, we need to find a way to do it, because our competition is not going to let us get complacent for very long, especially in a down market.
Oh yeah, for sure. I got a million questions, but one of the one that's been stuck in the back of my mind is something you said about 18 minutes ago about recruiting at high schools. And I know we all have, well, I say we all, I believe that the construction industry as a whole has a labor shortage. And in the Metroplex, we're trying to solve for. The Texo, our construction industry, our AGC, ABC affiliate here in the Metroplex is actively at high schools and things like this. But yeah. I'm curious what your strategy is there as we all sort of work to solve the same problem. Tell me about something you're doing great there that we can steal and do here as we try to fold more people into our business.
Well, I don't think there's any silver bullets into what we're doing. It just takes patience, number one, and you have to overcome a lot of the stigma that we have that's associated with the business. As you mentioned, Kevin, it's nobody says I want to go run a bulldozer the rest of my life. Although when they get on one, they go, "Oh, this is pretty cool," right?
Yeah.
But there's significant stigma. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people, especially my age, that when they think construction worker, they think about the guy running the jackhammer with tattoos on his arm and a wife beater and a cigarette and whistles at women when they go by. Right? That's what was propagated as a construction worker for so long. And construction workers in the real world are, what I see, are school board members. They run, Boy Scout packs. They coach Little League. They get involved in planning boards. We're not just ignorant brutes. So I think rearranging the message around what it means to be in the industry is one big thing. And you have guidance counselors you've got to overcome in that world. So we decided to bypass the guidance counselors and go straight to the tech schools. So the high school level tech schools, if Texas is like Maine, we don't have shop class anymore, right? So they all get funneled to regional tech schools, and we've begun to make inroads there and tell our story to what success looks like for these kids that are coming straight out of high school, joining us. In the first year, they come out and they make $60,000. And when you say things like that in front of a bunch of teachers, they raise their eyebrows, right? And they're like 60. Well, wait a minute, I don't even make that much,
right?
And so I think number one, we need to get the story right.
Yeah,
we got to take control of the narrative and make it right. Now, are there bad construction jobs out there? Yes, there are. But we got to take control of that narrative, and we got to focus on the people that can make a difference for us. And that's not the guidance counselors, I don't think. It's not the school principals. And then the other place I think it is getting the message out in a way. So on social media, so that the uncles of an 18-year-old go, I think little Joe might do well there. Right. And they begin to make those connections. So it's marketing the thing in a real way. But, frankly, our situation, what we offer is easy to market because we pour so much time and effort into making sure people don't fall through the cracks. But I think that's the key. And then we also, I think we need to work lower we need to get to the middle school levels. And we need to show people what's real at the middle school levels, and maybe even below that. Like we've had a few times, local recreation departments have brought their kids over, and we've lined up equipment here. And I'm talking second, third graders, and we bring them in and we show them the equipment, and we have some guys run some equipment, show them what it can do, let them climb on it a little bit, that sort of thing. And I think, what's the take going to be? Are we going to get 50% of those, or are we going to get 5%? But 5% is better than the 0 we've been getting for so long.
Well, one of the salient things you said to me was take control of the narrative. Like that's what you're doing a lot of things, but that's one of the things you're doing by having the rec kids over or ride around on equipment. They see like, no, this is substantively cool. Like this equipment is amazing. These people are kind and nice. They're doing well for, like that's the narrative that we're all trying to take control of. But just, we didn't start here because I don't like to say it out loud, but I'm an attorney, and attorneys have a similar problem. Like all attorneys are terrible people. Well, no, they're not, but there's a few of them that are terrible, and they give us all a bad reputation, and we fight consistently against it. Just like everyone else fights against their bad apples, but controlling that narrative is a really key thing to me.
Yeah.
We're kind of respectful of time today, so let me maybe spend us out of Sargent corporately, unless there's something I missed. I mean, I'm sure I feel like we could talk for 6 hours.
I got one thing before we spin us out.
Okay, go hit it, Kev.
That's still business related, just because selfish curiosity, which means other listeners would be too. And I wrote it down. I don't know where I got it from. Either it was your website, your profile, your LinkedIn. But winning in the field is key as a subcontractor. And you can hear Scott Kimplin say that all day. You can hear any subcontractor say that. The FMI book I'm reading right now, Profitable Business, Profitable Project, or something like that. Like it's all based on that. But what's the strategy and tactics to it? You got the Build a Life with Us program. That's big.
Yeah.
However, the office needs to feed the field. It needs to feed, so how do you view that optically? Is the office serving the field? Or like you don't have to give away secret sauce.
So that's one of our core values. We have invest in people, honing our craft, do the right thing, and win in the field. And I just want to explain what winning in the field means. We go on to say we're going to show up with the right spirit of execution that you're going to be, in effect, you're going to be glad we're here and you're going to win while we're here. Whether you're the owner, the traveling public, depending on who it is, the employee, we're going to show up with the right spirit that we're going to do things right and you're going to be glad we're here and you're going to win as a result. So, the question as a subcontractor, sometimes we don't win, frankly. General contractors take the win right out of you. And so that's on occasion. But that's what the win in the field thing means to us.
Got it.
It's the idea we're going to show up with our boots tied.
With a game plan and ready to rock.
Right.
The turn of phrase there is really good too. A spirit of execution. Because it's one of those things that I feel it, like I get it. Like a spirit of execution is something like you see it or you know it when you see it, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can watch people. I tell our guys, I coached Little League for several years, and I had this catcher who was a great athlete, and a big kid. But if somebody made an error in the field, his shoulders would slump, and his head would go down, and he'd throw his mask down, and I had to talk to him. Listen, everyone knows you're the best player in the field, and so when your whole demeanor changes like that, everybody says we can't win. Mm-hmm. If Cody says we can't win, we can't win. So I want my guys to show up with their chest out in the right way and with just the right amount of swagger that we're going to make sure you win here with us. And that's, to me, the big difference. I mentioned we're going to show up with our boots tied. Nothing turns me off more than guys showing up and getting in ready for stretches and they don't have their boots tied. And it's like, come on, come here ready to go to work. That's the spirit of execution. They didn't show up that way.
I just thought that was a turn of phrase. That's actually a pet peeve.
Well, I got a few.
I think we all do.
I've earned that license.
Yeah. All right, Little League is a good transition point as we kind of turn ourselves around the bend here. Coaching Little League usually necessitates having some kids playing. So tell me, family, kids, what's the not at work Herb up to?
Anymore, I just want to be on a boat in the water somewhere. And if everything's going perfectly, I've got my Traeger smoker all set up, and I'm changing the temperature from the boat.
There you go.
So, yeah, that's that. Spending time with my wife and traveling some. We don't travel a lot, but I've got two children, 33 and 30, a daughter and a son. And they didn't have any interest in construction, but I have so much respect for them, so much admiration for what they do. And, spending time with them when I can. One lives right here close to me and the other one lives a couple hours away, but spending time with them. And that's really where I get my jollies.
I got boating questions. I don't love a boat as much as you do, obviously, but, being in Maine, what are your bodies of water? Is this ocean boating?
Well, we have access to the ocean, but for me, we're on a lake. There's a lot of lakes in Maine. Okay. I don't think we're quite like, I think Minnesota's a land of 10,000 lakes. Uh-huh. I don't know if we have 10,000 or not, but there's a lot of freshwater bodies in Maine, freshwater lakes that are, many of which are like crystal clear. So that's where I spend most of my time.
Sounds amazing.
We're coming as a tourist. What town should we visit?
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
So everyone wants to go to Bar Harbor, Maine, and that's on an island which has a causeway built to it now. But there's a national park there, Acadia National Park. Everyone wants to go to Bar Harbor. I say go to Acadia National Park, go to that island, but stay the hell away from Bar Harbor because it's too busy and you don't see the real Mainers.
You know what?
There's other places on that island, other harbors that are actually working lobster fisher, fisher places.
This will be a weird main cut, and I may have to just take it out because it's going to be so obscure. But I was talking with the kids the other day about books that they should read, and we got off to talking about Pet Sematary, because isn't Stephen King's Pet Sematary set in Maine?
Yes, almost all his books are in Maine.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, he's from Maine.
Didn't know that either.
Well, he was actually a teacher at my high school.
Really?
Before he got famous, about 2 years before I got into high school there, he was teaching there.
Amazing.
So he lives right in Bangor, Maine, and that's the one thing. Every time we have visitors, I have to drive by Stephen King's house.
Well, I couldn't convince. I sort of gave a plot synopsis of Pet Sematary to the boy. I have a 16-year-old, 14-year-old boy. Gave the plot synopsis to him, and they're like, "Nah, I'm not reading that." That's a good book. It's a good book, man. So I couldn't get him to do it. But
yeah, what's the movie that he wrote the book? It was kind of a novella. That was the prison movie. I can't remember. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it.
It's
Morgan Freeman.
Yes, they escaped from prison. Shawshank Redemption.
Yes. So he wrote that, and that was based in Maine also.
Didn't know that. Great movie, by the way. One of the 10 I've seen.
It's beautiful. I'm looking at images right now. It's beautiful. Bar Harbor.
So when do we need to come see you, Herb? Like, what's the right time of year for us to
just give me a week or so notice. I would not come in January.
Oh, fair.
I probably wouldn't come in June. The weather's still a little bit iffy. To me, the best time to come is October, early October.
Ooh, I love
that. And you catch the foliage and all that stuff. It's cool. You can go to Mount Desert Island and Acadia National Park and hike. There's a lot of great hikes on that island and catch a lot of foliage and eat some lobster.
That sounds so. Kevin and I will come see you. My birthday's in October, so we'll come see you for my birthday. It's going to be great. Kev, you in?
Yeah, and I already booked my flight.
There you go. Well, hey, before we go, we usually like to wrap up our recordings with letting the guests give us kind of a one big thing, like a big takeaway. You know, you've had experiences and people and journeys and all the things. What's the one big takeaway from Herb?
To me, I think it's what does resilience mean to you as an individual and to your organization? And if you're someone that's in an organization and you would like to move up, number one, fix your own resilience and then figure out what resilience means to your company. Have those discussions with people in your company and figure out how you can address those.
Man, every time we get to the end of these, I wish we had another hour to keep chatting. But thanks for spending some time with us today.
I'm glad to. Thank you for having me on.